been doing this for 20 years. So if you do the pre-production stuff and bring your client along with you, refining that process and communication early on. Those post-production revisions, it's very rare to get much changes at all. I feel like every time I really trust other people in the creative, the product always ends up so much better than I could have ever done on my own. Ultimately, I want the client to be happy. I want them to walk away with like something that they're happy with. It needs to be something I'm happy with too. And getting there can be challenging sometimes, but the industry is the same. There's not really book knowledge. Like you just need to experience it. You just got to do it and learn, right?
Welcome to Let's Fix Post, the show about making post-production smoother, smarter, and more collaborative for creative teams and editors alike. Make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. Today I'm excited to chat with Josh Youngbar, an accomplished commercial filmmaker who I met in a cohort for creative entrepreneurs that is run through Chad Brown's company, Founder Freedom. His experience growing his business Connect Films from a one-person operation to a company with a strong in-house team is a powerful lesson in how to scale a creative business without sacrificing quality. And in case you don't believe me, Josh has over 20 years of experience and has also won 6 Emmys and a National Gold Telly as a testament for his ability to maintain quality while scaling over the years. In our conversation, we talk about Josh's approach to delegating creative work and why he trusts his team to do it better than he can. We also talk about the importance of collaborative culture and how it leads to a more fulfilling creative process. We also talk openly about the pros and cons of having an in-house editor versus outsourcing to a freelancer or a post house. And then Josh wraps up by giving his best advice for other creative professionals who are struggling to let go of the edit. I really enjoyed our conversation and I hope you do too. Let's get into it. I am grateful, Josh, that you agreed to join me on this. I was really interested to chat with you, I think in particular because of the context in which we met. So I think it's kind of an interesting story or just like a good thing to know. So you and I both met in Chad Brown's accelerator course through Founders League, his company, and went through, what was it, like a 3 or 4 month cohort experience together. Yeah. With other filmmakers, mostly. I think it was just pitched as like mainly creative entrepreneurs, but all of us ended up being in the video industry.
Yeah.
And that to me, I think just signaled that like you already have scaling operations, like, you know, figuring out systems on your mind anyways, not kind of just going through the motions of like hopping from creative project to creative project. There's like, you know, more of an urge to create something with some longevity there. And so once I found out that you had internal editors and that you've, you know, been in this field for a while, I was really interested and wanted to chat with you about that. So maybe for anybody who doesn't know you, just catch us up on, you know, where you're at, what you've been working on.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been doing some type of commercial production for 21 years now. And so, you know, I started out pretty green, but working for some other people and then kind of moved my way into being the lead in, you know, a couple marketing agencies over time. And then almost 3 years ago, decided to kind of take steps to branch out from one of those marketing agencies and then, but still maintaining a relationship so that I still do a lot of work for them. And I have 6 Emmys for different commercials I've done. And then I just got a national gold telly for one of the other for just like last week. Found out because
Congrats.
yeah, the project we did just a few months back. I didn't know this other agency that I do work for. They even submitted it, and then until after they won, and then they were like, "Hey, we won! Congrats!" They sent it to
By
me.
the way,
Like,
you
by the
win.
way, yeah. Over those 20 years, really found that, you know, being able to tell creative and engaging stories is the part that I love the most. And so as I grew and started to learn to delegate some of these other tasks and bring on more crew onto the production, you know, bringing on people and helping with post production, you know, kind of has gotten to me to where I'm at right now. Right.
That's great. And what kind of projects are you typically taking on, or what industries do you typically serve?
Projects are it's all over the place. The industry is the same. Like it's but I do throughout the year I'll do a handful of you know decent sized budget 30-second commercials where we're pitching ideas and writing, storyboarding and scripting and then hiring talent and all that stuff, like which I actually have one on filming tomorrow.
Hmm.
But then I do also do a lot of like the kind of doc style storytelling about different things, again, whether it's movie theater owner, which I've done a handful of those because of specific client and project, but like customer testimonials for a construction company or a medical company, or or a brand stories about the founders of different random companies. And so kind of all that stuff, I do a lot of those content as well, because yeah, because I found that I'm really good at interviewing and finding this uniqueness and getting the passion out of people of what they do and what they like about what they do.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's good to find that that strong suit that like aligns with the passions, and then you build up the portfolio work, and then suddenly that's that's your area of expertise. So what I was really interested to chat with you about, Josh, was the in-house editors that you have, and how I guess maybe my first question is like, well, did something happen, or like what was the initial point where you realized this is the help I need and this is the route I'm going to go?
I think going from like a solo person, right, to expanding and bringing somebody on, other than getting help during production, I feel like the next thing that to relieve some of your time is to offload some of the post production. And so if you want to be able to scale and take on more work, or even have some of your time back, it's helpful to have a person you can delegate some of the post work to. Is even if it's in my case, especially when I first started off, it was even just getting almost like having like assistant editor, like just someone that could at least get the heavy lift of getting things going, and then I would go in. And but as I worked with a few different people for longer, and you start to be able to teach them a little bit of your method, right, your thought process and things, and able to get them to where, I mean, the people I work with now, I trust them to get projects done. And I know they'll still review things, but if there was some reason they had to send something and I didn't look at it, I wouldn't be that worried. Like I'd feel confident that they're, because rarely there are major things that need to be changed. Just little tweaks. Sometimes I have ideas or thoughts, but it doesn't mean it's like not good what they did. It just means that, hey, here's something maybe we can make it a little bit better, right?
Yeah, I feel like most creative projects benefit from an outside perspective. So like before I
Yeah,
had a team, I'd be like, "Hey, Brittany," to my wife, I'd be like, "Hey, you get to watch something now." And it's just like getting that second set of eyes, because I feel like especially in post, you can get so, I've found, at least I get so deep and focused, and I try to fix one little thing that, and I'll gloss over like a more glaring overarching issue that she'll call out. And so I think
100%.
having that sounding board is helpful.
I know even playing something for someone else, I will see things I didn't catch the other 10 times I
Mm.
watched it while I was right. Just having someone there, early days, showing it to my wife or whoever was willing to watch it with me. And I remember because again, I think you and I have talked about this, but I started out inside of a small agency, and I mean, it was just me. So there was a lot of times, I mean, I'd pull a designer or like a whatever like person that like, and they'd be like, I don't really know what video. I was like, that's all right, just look at it, just see if there's anything that stands out to because yeah, it just getting someone's else's outside perspective, fresh eyes on it makes a big difference on.
And I feel like even having someone that is inexperienced in video, it's like perfect. Like that's your truest sense of the audience, right? Is somebody who's
Mhm.
maybe looking at it for the message of what's being said, not necessarily the technical nature of like what is catching your eye as the creative professional, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so I'm curious though, like, was there a moment or like a project that came up or like a pain point that you experienced where you were like, I need the help in editing? Was there anything around that that contributed to like an in-house
is the way to go.
I mean, the first time I had someone in house would have been at the agency. At the point I was working 70. So I mean, basically just to keep up with the post work, I was working in evenings and on Saturdays to keep up the work because my days were mostly either meetings and prep for things or filming, right? And so the Monday through Friday 9 to 5 time, right? And it was like, hey, we really do something about this. I kept raising my hand. And we did try to go the route of like, and of course, this going back, this would have been probably at least 10 years ago, maybe 12. And so it might have been a little early to doing the little bit more of the remote work direct. So maybe shipping drives would have still been a possibility. But what we did try to do is find somebody more regional that we could, almost have a freelance that could maybe come to the office a little bit if they had to or whatever in our general region. But really was struggling to find anybody competent. Of course, I don't live in a major city or at least an hour from a major city. So we posted a job position and it just so happened that a gentleman who was basically doing the same thing I was doing, but at another small little graphic design agency video that was 30 minutes of the next town over, and he applied for this position. And I was like, oh, well, I know his work, and he's got some strengths that counterbalance my things, and like I really appreciated his lighting and stuff he would film, and I was like, so I met with him, and we ended up just hiring full time, and he kind of came on as my cinematographer slash editor, and so then it kind of got used to having that person, and then we ended up adding a third person, kind of an audio guy. Anyway, and that was up until COVID, and COVID happened, and it was back to just me, and then of course eventually went on my own. But on my own, I just happened to have someone who has already helped me do some basic kind of grip and PA work, but she had some experience in editing, and I just said, "Hey, you want to start doing some of the stuff?" And she literally lives like 2 miles down from my house,
Mm.
so it was just one of those convenient things, and it turned out like she really picked up quickly, like my style and what I needed, and so that's where I currently am. Like she's my first go to for editing, and then I have another guy that also does it sometimes, and then of course I'll jump in and do some stuff too if need be. But
Maybe at like a high level view or like broad strokes, can you walk me through a little bit of like what does that workflow or process look like? Like imparting the project details onto them in through the working supervising as it's going, and then draft review in through like work bringing the client in. How does that look with them as internal employees?
I'll split is the process a little different too. So if it's interview style videos, well, a lot of times I'll have them do what we call like just a story cut, which is no B-roll, no nothing. And of course I'll give them the broad strokes of the story, which we normally have a document because there's something I prepped before we even shot anything that has like here's the outline of the goal of the story, because I'll do pre-interviews and stuff normally on those kind of things. So it kind of have some structure that we're going for, and we structure our questions around that. And then so going into the interview, we're not just winging it, and so I'll have some of that structure to pass on to them. And then we'll normally go over that together, right? Like when they have that cut ready, and that way I can kind of tweak. And then depending on the client, sometimes we show that to the client. There's certain clients we have that are pretty savvy and like to see that. And so it's like, okay, let's get so sign off on script, so to speak. Like, hey, here's the bed of the story, and we can hand that over to them, and they can sign off on that, and from there they can move on to adding all the b-roll and the music and things like that. And then again, like I said, normally the first draft of that at least I'll review as well and just see if there's any tweaks we want to do, and then it goes to client, and then from there, I mean, I think it's a little bit of um, how I work with the client and really guide them from the beginning, even before production. So by the time it gets to that post production, when they start seeing these drafts, like it should be pretty. So we rarely get significant changes to those drafts. It's normally that first draft will just have a few tweaks here and there, and just little things that you're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, we can move that, take that one shot out, or do this thing. Um, every once in a while, obviously, you always have that fluke project that might go a little different, and you're like, oh, I thought we communicated there early on, but there was something that got missed. But most of the time that runs pretty smoothly from that point. So it's just little tweaks here and there, and normally they can handle that, and my project manager will kind of review that and stuff. Just if it's like text change and this change, and just getting someone to second person look at it, as we were talking about earlier, just to kind of make sure the changes were done and before it gets passed on.
So you even have a project manager separate from yourself that might weigh in on some of maybe not creative decisions, but on like
Correct.
supervision of some kind.
Yep. Yeah. So I have a she's part time, but project manager, and also acts kind of as like my personal assistant as well if I need her to do
Hmm.
some stuff. But yeah, so she's got a pulse on all the projects that we're doing. So in deadlines and things, and who's working on them, so that I don't have to do that, because I used to have to do that. That's
Yeah,
a,
no,
I
that's
mean,
great.
again, as a business owner, like as you keep leveling up, so to speak, or whatever, growing, finding those things that buy back your time, or whatever term you want to use, right? Finding those things you can free up your time, and so that came a bottleneck like almost a year, well, really a year and a half ago, and I was like, really, I got to find another way to offload some of my responsibilities that are on me, and that's kind of where I went, was finding someone that could be kind of a project manager, but then also willing to, like, I can just be like, hey, can you set this meeting up or do this thing for me too, and so yeah.
Hmm. That's great. Yeah. So let's look at that really quick. So maybe not the project manager per se, but just this concept. And I know that I think we both have read the book, right? Buy Back Your
I
Time
have,
by Dan
yes,
Martell.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Huge. And so simple, right? But
yeah,
the most profound things are super simple, I found.
yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
l- let's talk a little bit about like, how did your role change within your own company once you brought on maybe your first editor?
It's all about control and delegation, right? Like that's especially if you're used to doing it all. It's and he says in that, if you can find somebody to do it 80% as good as you, hand it off. And I think that's a key thing to kind of remember about that. It's so easy to think it needs to be exactly how you've done it. But I think what I learned before even doing it with post, you learn in production, you learn to trust other creatives, right? Like if you've got a DP and you've got a gaffer and you've got a sound and you've got even like maybe set design or whatever, you've got to learn to delegate quickly, and to trust their collaboration in the creative process. It's the same in post, right? Like if I mean, yeah, if you got somebody who's very inexperienced, then you might be teaching them, but once you got somebody that's got some knowledge, like they're a creative just like you. Yeah, you need to give them that big picture, like here's where we're going, but allow them to surprise you with something you would have probably never done or had done. And I think that's one, the beauty of this whole industry anyway, is all these people getting to work together and creating something that none of us could have done on our own. And it's like this thing but that totally applies in post production, especially when you get into some of the details. Like, so my medium definitely higher end projects, like, I still have a sound mixer, I'll pass things out to. I have a colorist sometimes let's pass stuff out to, because even though there's things we can do kind of internally, but when it gets to a certain level that I need it done, because like my sound mixer, like he can mix in 5.1, which every once in a while I have projects that need to be mixed in 5.1, not just so. And he also does really good sound design. So like our internal editors can't handle that at a certain level, but for sure, like when you start to get at a higher level, you're finding those experts, just like you do production on a production day or two, whatever. I think it's the same in post. Like you've got those people that can specialize in those things and really bring the level up on that as you use them.
Hmm. Yeah. And so then at that point, you're kind of shifting from, like, I don't know if you've read the E Myth, but like the technician role, like the person doing the work, now to this managerial side, right? Where you're now in charge of, supervising and overviewing the people that are actually in the technician seat, the ones doing the work. Was that a difficult transition to make when bringing on your editors, or did it go flow pretty naturally?
On one hand, I think it flowed pretty well. That first guy that I was talking about earlier, because he was already pretty experienced, and I even admired some of his attributes, it was very easy to be like, hey, let's be collaborative on this. But at the same time, knowing that, like I always look at, I'm the, keeper of the story, right? Like that's the main thing, right? Whatever, whether it's a narrative thing that we've pitched and written, or it's again a interview style that we just prepped, then kind of discovered what the story points we want to use. Um, so that's the key thing. I need to make sure like, hey, this is the thing, but always allowing that input from them, the creativity from them of how to approach that at the different steps of the process is key. Same again on set. Someone's like, hey, what if we light it this way or do this, and you're like, yeah, that works actually, that it strengthens the story in this way, whatever, versus something else. And then same in post. I think it's just as important to have that input and know that North Star of here's where we're going, but like getting there, right? Like there's different paths to get there, and sometimes there's better things that I didn't think of.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love that phrase, like the keeper of the story. So looking at revisions, then, so like say you've gotten a cut back, and it's not quite there. Maybe it's off a lot, maybe it's off a little, but either way, it's not working. What is your like typical approach to giving revisions? And I guess as a additional question to that, does it change at all between working with an in-house editor or an external vendor?
I don't think the process changes in house or external. Because that, from my perspective, this is just how I approach it. Um, Ultimately, I want the client to be happy, right? Like I want them to walk away with like something that they're happy with. Now, and it needs to be something I'm happy with too. But and getting there can be challenging sometimes. But I think really comes down to that, really refining that process and communication early on through the process. It's like if you do, and I've been doing this for 20 years. So if you do the pre-production stuff and bring your client along with you, those post-production revisions, it's very rare to get much changes at all. Not that it doesn't ever happen, but like most of the time just minor. And at times there has been like a little bit more significant changes. When you get it back, they're right. Like it's
Mm,
like, oh no, this is not like, and again, like we were talking about, sometimes you can get, and even as a team, even with an internal team, you can get a little too focused on something. And then if finally the client sees it, comes back and you're like, yeah, this isn't quite working. Let's kind of rework this. Let's talk about what's not working. And as long as everyone's got the goal of like making the best thing we can, um, I think that's okay, right? Like that comes back and you're like, actually, they're right. Then yeah. But most of the time, again, if you're doing your job on the front end, and kind of get to that back end, it's pretty. At least I find it's pretty straightforward. Honestly, you get that draft that we're happy with internally, and then it's like minor changes here and there after.
yeah, I could definitely see how having the client in the pre-production and kind of creeping into the edit where you're doing like the content cut or like the radio edit before you're spending, X amount of hours going into all the B-roll and the music and the pacing and all that. But what about like internally? Like, do you have any suggestions or tips for like
Mm.
how you communicate with the editor? Like if there's something that's out of alignment, like what are some of your go-to like approaches or like phrases that you'll use to kind of get the editor on board with making changes that better align it with the
Mm.
end goal of the video?
Would say I know I've done this in the past at certain levels. Finding other examples of videos that either I've done or even someone else has done, but are like, here's kind of the vibe we're going for. Here's and I feel like this is off. Here's kind of more the style I was thinking this should be. If something comes back a little different, than because then it's you need something that you can both look at together and understand that. Yeah, I would say that's probably the best tool. I mean, there's been times where I'm like, just I go find some tracks, music tracks, because like there's something about what was found that it just doesn't fit right to me. And
Mm.
then I
Hmm.
mean, and I, again, sometimes that's just more personal preference. But if I had heard something in my head for this project, and then the editor might throw something else in, and then I'm like, well, it's not bad, but like I was thinking something else, and then I might just go find some examples, and I'll send it and be like, here's kind of more the style I was thinking. I don't want to ever stifle their creativity, so I don't want to ever like be a dictator in it, because it's more about them understanding the direction, not necessarily me making the decisions, right? Because then they learn, so the next time they can probably do a better job on their own, right?
How did you come to have that approach? Did you experience a time where maybe you leaned too heavy into the like, I guess micromanaging might be one of the terms that you'd use here, but like, did you find that a project suffered from being too involved or stifling the
Mm.
creativity of the editor?
I would say I think it was more my experience early on starting out that kind of made me very self-aware of that. I think the few people I worked for before I was kind of like the person in charge, so to speak, um, really didn't didn't they micromanage things and almost like sit over your shoulder, edit, and
Mm.
and you're like, well, I'm supposed to be editing this, or what are you? And so I think that made me just really self-aware of it early
Hmm.
on. So then when I finally ended up in that position, now I'm sure I wasn't great at it in the beginning. I probably still did that some, but being that I maybe would notice it a little bit more and kind of self-correct, I think. But I'm sure there's still times where probably people that do work for me are probably like, would you just let me do this? Because I'm sure there's things that I maybe control a little bit too much. No one's obviously perfect at that stuff, but I try. Again, I really do. I feel like every time I allow for the circle or to be a little bit bigger in the collaboration and really trust other people in the creative, the the product always ends up so much better than I could have ever done on my own. That just reinforces that every time. And so at this point, like I think it's come more second nature at this point, but I'm sure there was a time where it was I had to force myself to let go of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's the giving up control is the challenge is real, I feel like, and kind of just the whole. I think everyone aspires to like, I want to just trust the creative and trust the expert in the seat, um, and let go of that. But it can be easier said than done, I think. And um, I'm curious too. Like, do you feel like I don't know how early into like your current employees' professional careers your opportunity for them came up, but is that a like, let's say if it was earlier in their career and you kind of imparted a lot of the knowledge, a lot of your knowledge onto them, taught them the processes that they didn't have in place before, I could see how relinquishing creative control might even be tougher, where it's like, I taught you everything you know, and now I'm expected to take a back seat. Like, was that any at all your experience working with them, or were they already pretty well established into their careers when they started working for you?
So one of the people I work with works for me is who's younger, is my son. But then also like he's never worked with anybody else really in this capacity. He did have at other jobs and stuff, but like, but also there's the eerie thing where like he kind of is like a small mini version of myself, and which is awesome in sometimes because like he can practically read my mind, but also can be super frustrating other times. So
Yeah,
but he's kind of the other kind of secondary editor because it's not like his passion, but he can do it.
sure.
So the lady Mallory that does is the primary editor for me.
Hmm.
She's in her early 30s and went to college for film production and then had several different jobs, mostly some a little bit of shooting, but mostly editing. And then she's kind of been with me for like 3 years now. So, um, but yeah, so she's a little more experienced, but also had not done work. I would say at this higher level that we do. So she came in like still wanting to learn a lot from me,
Mm.
which then we
Hmm.
were able to work together. And I really was just like, because it was earlier on, I wasn't as overwhelmed, and I was just like, hey, what you feel comfortable doing, I will happy to hand off. But as you learn and you want to take on more, and so it was just like like a little bit back and forth like that. And so, if she felt like she could get it to a certain point and then I'd need to finish it, that was fine.
Hmm.
And just, but now again, like I said, she, especially interview style videos, she kills them all the time. Half time, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't think I would have done that good. So
Yeah,
yeah, she
that's the
would,
best, right? Is where
yeah, yeah.
you're hiring someone better than you in that particular seat,
Hmm.
right? I think that's
Hmm.
what,
That's always,
how,
that's the goal, right?
yeah. Yeah, and to be like pleasantly surprised where like I didn't see the solution, but you found one and it's better than any solution I was going to come up with. So
Hmm.
I think like yeah, you build that rapport. I would assume you build that rapport over time and then suddenly that letting go of control isn't as tough because
Hmm.
you've seen it proven time and again, even maybe in moments where you weren't expecting it.
Want them to feel ready too, right? Because it is like there's experience levels in our industry, especially and it's there's always that balance. And I mean, I find this too in my own work and where I'm at. There's a balance of like you don't want to take on too much, but you do want to always be challenging yourself. So like leveling up a little bit to push yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone. So you're doing something a little bit um growth oriented. What I do now, if I went back 10 years ago, it scared the crap out of me to say like I needed to do this, right? Like because it would have
Mhm.
been too much.
Mhm.
So the pressure would have been too much. I mean, I might have still said, yeah, let me try, but I'm sure I probably would have screwed up a little bit too much. But like, like because you just didn't have the skill sets built.
Mhm.
And so it's a lot of, a lot of that comes into play, I think, in this industry because it's a lot of it's just, putting those 10,000 hours in, right? Like and getting to that point where you're an expert at this because you just done it so much because there's not really book knowledge, right? Like you just need to experience it. You can't really read a book to learn to edit. It's like it doesn't, I mean, it'll teach you the software, but like you're not really, you just got to do it and learn, right?
Yeah, yeah, the trial by fire, right? So I'm curious, like, I think this is where there is a difference, I would guess, but maybe you can tell me otherwise, between like having an in-house editor versus any version or flavor of an outsourced, right? Be that a freelancer, a post house. As in-house editors, or like I guess I should say from your perspective, as their employer, as their boss, their manager, like, do you feel responsible for setting up those situations where they can uh, be asked to operate outside of their comfort zone? And would that be different than if you were working with a freelancer? Then you're more of like a client, right? In
Mhm.
that sense, like,
I
do
would,
you have you
yeah.
experienced any?
Well, I mean, I would say yes. I mean, I haven't used a lot of freelance or production houses that, outside just because of what I've had at my disposal. But yeah, I think I would feel less inclined to push a person that's not in my manager, right? But I definitely do. Like and when I see like, okay, this you're getting good at this. Let's give you something else that you haven't tried before. Or let me encourage or push you to do this project at this that I have a little higher expectations for than this other project because of budgets or whatever reason, right? Because I don't know, stuff you guys work on, but like, yeah, I mean, the range is pretty broad on the stuff we take on from a budget standpoint, and you have to even a person in the post work, like you just know, okay, we can only really give this much time to this, and it's okay if it's not this amazing masterpiece. The client will be happy because it's all their expectations are here too, right? And then you got these guys up here and their expectations up there, and so there there's steps in between of an editor feeling comfortable to be able to create that or this and knowing and learning that. I mean, that's the I think a challenge in this, in budgets and what you can do, right? I think some creatives have difficulty with that, being like, hey, I want to make everything this up here, and it's like you got to be okay with just doing this. It's hard sometimes, but like knowing, hey, this is what this budget allows, and we did the best we could in that in that budget.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you brought up budget. Let's talk about that for a minute here, because I assume again, and I don't. Maybe you can shed some light on like your pay structure. You don't have to get into numbers per se, but I have employees, right? And I pay them hourly. But as a business, a lot of the work that we take on is flat rate. right? So I'm now in charge. I'm taking on all the risk of whether this thing is going to be profitable at the end, or am I going to have the gumption to like upcharge the client, be like, hey, this is taking longer. If it my only real lever I can pull with budget for the client is if it goes out of scope and they start
Mhm.
asking for more things, or they want it faster, or there's just something that's not based on when I
Yeah,
quoted out flat rate. But that internal clock can run all day and night as long as they need. And so now, again, like I said, I'm assuming all this risk. Is that the same dynamic that you're facing, or do you pay them like, do you have like a piece rate figured out where it is more flat rate?
I do pay them hourly, but we do kind of have a flat rate agreement in general. And
Mm.
then, so like on per project, I'll be like, hey, here's what we have on this project. And if you're good with that, okay. But then there's that the same, and it's so in reality, it's not drastically different. It just, so then if it goes out of scope a little bit, right? I'm not expecting them to take that on. So if there's, but then if I'm like, okay, this is minor, I'm not going to be the squeaky wheel for this client that I get work for them all the time. But, you know, I'm going to eat that few extra hours it's going to take for them to do that, even though it's over and stuff. So I do assume that risk, or even, I mean, sometimes it's, nonprofit and we're doing pro bono, I'll still pay them to do the work, right? So
Yeah.
there's that in there because, I'm looking at it from a business perspective, and it's like, hey, it's good to maintain that relationship and not, again, like use the squeaky wheel thing. Like I don't want to constantly be asking, hey, can we have a few extra hours, a few $100 here and there or whatever. You don't want to
Hmm.
be that
Hmm.
guy if it's somebody you're working with all the time. But then I don't expect them to also take that on. So it's kind of like in that balance. Now, obviously, if it's something really out of scope, then I'm going to be like, hey, you know, to the client, and then we'll get more time, and then let them, you know, get paid to do that for that more time. But
Yeah, and then I guess that kind of segues into like what you were talking about earlier, where it's like balancing this, like, it's tough to say as a creative, but it's like this done is better than perfect type approach that you have to have. Like you have to be grounded in like how much time is being spent versus what the output is going to be. Um, I don't know. What are some ways that you as a team have been able to kind of align on that, where this could be better, but we have to like lower our expectations for the sake of constraints, usually budget,
yeah,
right?
I mean, my gut would say a lot of times what I do to kind of set the, kind of, I would say the four different tiers that kind of things fall into for us, you know, I'll reference examples that we've done already, basically, and be like, hey,
Mm,
this is like this project we did 3 months ago, or this is kind of like this project we did last year, and the budget wise and stuff and expectations, so that it just kind of sets that tone. Now, again, we have that historical data because these people have been working with me for several years, and and so we kind of can do that. Um, but I mean, I assume even if you hadn't, you could still just present that project and be like, here, this edit, see this. This is kind of what we're expecting on this, versus something that's a little bit higher end and needs more of all these other work and sound design and coloring and all this stuff, and then you present that instead and say, hey, here's where we're going for. There's a lot more work involved to get here, but
hmm
we got the time to do it or whatever. Here's the budget. I'm going off of like what we do, and we do do pretty sliding scale of stuff. Like we'll take, I'll take on a project for a few $1,000s. It might just be one camera person going to cover an event and doing a recap video, right? And
hmm
that's also partly give work to my team, right? Like if they want to do that work, I'm happy to kind of take it on and make a small margin and let them kind of do it and use my gear and whatever. It's kind of it wouldn't be something I would be going out and doing, but I know, like, keep them busy, and they like, and if they're now, as soon as they were like, hey, we don't want to do this anymore, then I would, if someone came to me and said, can you cover this event for $3,000, I'd probably be like, no, sorry. Like,
mm,
because I don't want to do it. But on the bigger stuff's the stuff I enjoy doing and get involved in, and so
hmm
it's kind of when you're trying to get 15, probably 10, 15 grand or above, that I normally, otherwise anything below that, it's a lot of times I'm just either minorly involved, and delegate even kind of the directing, so to speak, and just let
Yeah.
so have part of the crew kind of handle it and stuff. But that's kind of kind of just also again learning to scale and just be like, I can't be involved in every project if we're gonna grow as a company, and so finding that kind of threshold where below here, and it's not always monetary, but below here in this area of a type of project, I'm just gonna let them kind of with a little bit of guidance and help
Own
if they
own a
need it.
bigger portion of it.
Yeah, and if they're like, hey, we need help, obviously I'm here, but
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So two thoughts off of that response.
Mhm.
That was great. So one, um, you were mentioning kind of like deciding whether or not you're taking these projects based on like how the team responds to it. So, one thing I'm always kind of like dealing with as another, studio owner who has
Mhm.
employees is like, what do you do? What are some of your solutions when you either have too much work, that is all due at the same time? Like, do you have like this fire team built up, or do you turn stuff away? And then on the flip side, like this is the bigger stressor, I think, for a business owner with employees is like, what do you do when there's not enough work?
When there's not enough work, when it slows down, to be honest, at least in the 2.5 years, whatever I've been in my own business, it's been small. It's been small windows that have been that, and they honestly are normally grateful for them because it's it's so busy that it's like, oh, it's a little bit of room to breathe. But even when like early this year it was a little quieter, I look for those opportunities of like a pro bono project or something to that is still allowing us to do some work, but it's a great nonprofit or something to partner with that kind of at least for marketing purpose we get seen, right, and then as like someone that did this thing and then a good organization that might not have the budget to do something anyway gets a good video, right? And so I look for those opportunities when we have some downtime. But again, those are kind of like what we talked about from a business standpoint, taking those risks. That's kind of starts to get into where how you manage things from a cash flow standpoint and other stuff like, do you have reserves, that kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
where you can take those risks when it's quiet, right? Some people don't have that flexibility. And then on the flip side, when it's too busy, you know, like it, it's kind of hit those points a couple times in the last 2 years where I'm like, crap, we almost need another editor, or we need, or I really need to find someone else to help in this. And so I've kind of looked at that, and um, on the production side, I definitely kind of worked on finding another guy last year. So I kind of have, if we really had to, which happened. There was a time I was flying back from, I think it was when I came back from Tulsa. I was there all week filming. So I was technically on a plane. It wasn't, but I had done like 3 or 4 days straight of production. I'm coming back, and I had two people doing another shoot somewhere, and then another guy doing something else at another location. So kind of had three projects going on almost at the same time from that standpoint. But again, finding getting enough of those freelancers, right, to have those guys that I work with regularly that can do that. But again, sometimes schedules don't allow, and then even if you have some stuff, it can be a little, it's a little challenging in that.
Mm-hmm.
And but then on the post side, it's definitely, uh, of course, it was before I met you, but last year there was definitely a point where I started thinking like, who else do I know that I maybe would want to do a little bit of work? And I even mentioned something I think to the guy who used to work for me years ago when we were inside the agency because he now composes music. That's all he does, compose music for
Cool.
things. Yeah, mostly commercials and stuff, but like a little bit of short films in here and there and things. But he's
Hmm.
super talented. But like also he's still, I know he's edited some stuff for his church and things still. And so I'm like, hey dude, if I ever needed, and he was like, yeah, sure, yeah, depending on my workload and stuff. But it didn't really come to that. But we were like this close last year to the point where I was like,
Mm-hmm.
if stuff doesn't change, now I probably would. I mean, just being true, I probably would reach out to you and just be like, hey, let's try a project, because you would obviously be a more consistent resource there if it worked out. So But yeah, there's definitely that. But then also, if it became enough of it, I'd be like, well, I need to find somebody locally because I don't want to just keep sending everything to David.
Yeah, no, let's get into it. I'm curious because so I think that there's like these ends of the spectrum, right? Like
Yeah,
in-house employee. Well, I guess doing it all yourself is probably the
but yeah,
furthest, like on
yeah,
one side. The next step would be like I feel like you either plant your flag on the partnerships and the outsourcing, or you plant it on the internal teams. So it's interesting, and I'm gonna dig
yeah.
into it
Let's
a
do
little
it.
bit because I'm interested. Is like so when you hit this point of overwhelm where you realize you've got consistent need and you've got like, you landed a new account in addition to all your others, everything's going great for the foreseeable future, you're going to need to operate at a capacity higher than your
Mhm.
current in-house can do.
Right.
So your gut was to kind of use the outsourcing as a band-aid or as a short fix, like an as needed sort of overflow. But once it hits where like I'm going to paraphrase and then you tell me if this is correct.
Yeah.
But then once the baseline shifts to the new normal is now 3 editors worth of work,
Mhm.
does your mindset then change to say another in-house editor is the beneficial route to go over continuing like an outsourced partnership? And if so, like why?
That's a good. I mean, that is my gut now, but one because I don't have a lot of experience working with outsourced editors, especially like a company like yours. Like
Mm,
the only thing I've had experience with is if you like just one-off freelancers, like working with them, and most of the time it's never really happy with what I get from it. It's like, oh, it'll pass. Thanks for helping me get this thing
let
done.
me
But
redo the whole
like,
thing and like
yeah, but I still end up having to do stuff, and so
sure.
like that's kind of that experience, and
Mm,
because we made it touched on this one of the other times we talked, but like, and again, I have no idea how you guys are, but like in those couple experiences, I found that then working with somebody internally, you can take the time to build a rapport and them understand what I'm looking for so that that stuff goes much smoother. And so if I was gonna have consistent work, I feel like I'd want to invest then in the next person that could also really understand and hone and do it the Connect Films way, so to speak, for lack of a better word. Then,
yeah.
and again, not that it's right or wrong, just this is how we put stuff out, right? So I think that's where my gut would go that way. But
Yeah.
to be transparent, I don't have an experience working with like a true company that, hey, we're a post house. We
Hmm.
know post production. Let us do that for you. Like I've never done that. And like I said, and again, I like I said earlier, but I think when that time would come, I would try it out and see. Because hey, maybe you would pleasantly surprised and be like, hey, this is great.
It's good to know. I was curious, like your experience with like outsourcing in general. It sounds like it hasn't been great. The times that you kind of in a pinch, right? It's like it's done, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not going on the website. Because yeah, honestly, man, I'm in a very interesting spot where I'm not hiring contractors. Like I would never hire a freelance editor. I mean, for one, I have to deal with like California labor law where it's like editing is my service offering, and
Hmm.
I can't hire a contractor to do my service offering. I also can't dictate how they do the work. Like we're very process heavy. So we have like all of our Premiere projects look the same. Resolve looks the same. Final Cut like everything is very regimented. Um, and you can't have that control with a contractor. Ethically, also, I feel weird being like, I'm already outsourced. Let me outsource it
Hmm.
again. So like,
Hmm.
I don't like that. But and then I guess complementary to that is like, I like having the team culture component to it. Like, I want to build a team. I want people. So what's weird for me is like, I have all those emotions, but then when I talk to people in the industry, I'm like, but you're not allowed to have so much. Like,
Right.
or at least I'm more willing to challenge it, right?
Yeah.
But like I'm more aligned with that baseline of like when you need to grow, you hire versus you outsource. Maybe there's some more baggage around that with where I'm located, but it's just always funny when I kind of self-reflexively realize I'm
Hmm.
like practicing something different than I'm preaching. So
Right.
I was always just curious
Yeah.
how your
Yeah.
gut was formed in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's some of it, and then I mean, some of it comes down to the culture too. I mean, you're right. Like, I find it's the same thing with even like on set. Like there's people I've worked with on set that I don't work with again. It's not because they're not competent and skill wise, but just personality or whatever reason, it just didn't jive with everyone else. And so like you're like, yeah, they were fine, but probably unless I'm in a pinch and they're around, might use them, but like otherwise they're not going to become like a new go-to person, right? And then but on the flip side, as an example, the other kind of DP cinematographer guy that I started working with last year that I hadn't worked, like he was like great fit. And then, and then once he worked, each time he worked with some people on the team that worked with, they're like, oh, Sean's great. Like everyone, like just personality wise and, just outlook on life, all those things that, matter. Because honestly, like, we try to have a blast when we're on, especially when we're on set and everyone's together and you just, trying to have fun. I mean, working hard, but we're trying to have fun, right? Yeah,
I'm
it's
always
this,
low key
it's,
jealous of production because I'm like stuck behind the screen, you know. It's like,
yeah.
oh, it looked like a lot of fun you guys had. But that, yeah, I mean, that's great. The whole cultural component to it, I think, is not without putting some weight into, right?
But even also the same with like, the more core team, like, because like the post, both the people that edit and the project manager, like, we're the ones that like we have our weekly meeting, we do all that stuff, and so it's kind of nice to have that culture, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, and all the like camaraderie and the legacy knowledge or like the shared experiences that go along with that. Um, I have like two last questions. So one is, and I'm gonna kind of flip it around so it's we end on a positive note. And this is the first of two. So the first is like, what are the cons of having in-house team editors as opposed to freelance or post-house or what external of some kind? And then the flip side is, let's end on the positive. Like, what are the pros? Like, what are some of the biggest things that you just don't think that you could get with the external? So cons first, negative. Why should someone not, or what should they seriously consider before hiring?
obviously one con we talked a little bit. I mean, you've got that person you have to support financially in some level, right? um Especially if they're like a full-time W-2 employee. But the other one I would say is, uh you know everyone has their style, and so if you need someone that can do something a little different, they might not be able to deliver it. And
Mm,
I I look at that more, we were talking earlier. I had that guy, first time I ever had somebody working for me, and he kind of fit in as like a DP. It was great, and honestly, it was great. And then when he decided to move on and do music full time, he, I started having to work with other DPs and found out, well, there's other great guys out there, and they have unique styles. And then I started to pay attention to that more as a per project, right? Like, hey, this project, I need this style. I'm going to
mm,
hire that guy. This project, I need this look, right? Like, I'm going to hire this guy. And so, in the same in post, like everyone's got their own creative style, right? So, I think I do it with the two people on my team. Like, hey, this is better fit for you. This is better fit for you. But I mean, going outsource, like con, you're limited to those few people you have internally, or one person or whatever.
mhm.
Whereas, like, on the flip side, if you went to someone, either you're freelancing it all over the place and you have developed some connection with different people, and you're like, oh, this guy's great at, explainer videos or whatever, and I'm going to always give those to him because and this lady over here, she's great at those narrative talking heads. Let's like always give those to her. And, and then you get better product in the end because they're better at those unique skills.
Yeah, just so like a wider net that you can kind of maybe not a net, but a network, right, of people that you
Mhm.
can assign different
Yeah.
things to based on their strengths. Okay, yeah, so limited. So potentially, if you're going strictly in-house, limited skill set, and then that kind of responsibility, that financial responsibility
Mhm.
or obligation to now say like, this is your full-time gig with me. Then you have to follow through on that, or then have those tough conversations about scaling back hours or doing the layoff or the seasonal approach. Like, yeah, all of that is like very real in my world as
Mhm.
well. What about the pros? What are some of the things that you don't think you could replicate any other way?
I think we talked a little bit about the culture. The It would be a lot harder to get someone to be, I think, as in tune with a certain workflow, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, hey, this is the way I want things done, and that person's there. I think the availability. I think that
Mm,
I see that in well, again, more on the production side where I use freelance a lot more, but like, sometimes you have something come up and you're like, crap, I need to do this, and you can't find anybody to do the work because they're all busy, right? Because there's this date and this deadline. Whereas if there's someone there that's your dedicated person, you can move stuff around. You can be like, actually, this thing that now is not due for, isn't really that busy. We got this crazy thing came in. We want to turn this around. I'm going to switch you on this. And you can do that where you can't do that with someone externally. So,
yeah, the dependability side, maybe some of that legacy knowledge around, like you were saying, like either how you work or how that client is. So just some of the nuances there.
yeah, because some clients that you're working with for years and then that person just knows that stuff like from, oh yeah, I can grab that footage from that thing from 2 years ago. Like
Mm,
it just,
hmm.
throw that in there because we know we have it. Whereas, someone else outside might not know that stuff.
Earlier, we were talking about how you get on the same page with an editor around how much time is available on a project and like what basically what the budget translates into for how much you can spend
Mhm.
on post. And one of the tools that you said that you would leverage in kind of aligning on those expectations was inspiration videos or like previous videos that you've done where it's like, we're looking to hit about this benchmark for this one. And that kind of sets some of the tone around like the pace or the storytelling, the style, or maybe we're going for this. And now it kind of implies more time being spent. So inspiration videos is like one point of input. And I'm always curious, like I was asking myself this as an editor, what would be, if I could pick three things to know about a project at the front end, what would I want to know? And so I guess maybe retooling that question from your perspective, if you had a very short conversation or like maybe you could only tweet to your editor, you had a certain number of characters that you could give them about a project, what would be the three variables that you would give an editor to guide them on a project?
Finished length is a good one. Like a
The runtime.
like what the goal is. Is it 30 seconds? Is it 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever? I think
Mm-hmm.
that's always critical information to know what we're shooting for. Pacing, right? Like, does it need to be fast, slow, medium? Is it upbeat? Is it serious? Is it what like comedic? What is that kind of the tone and style of that? And then I think those are important. I mean, it's kind of along the same lines, but like also a little bit of a color tone. Do we want it to be warm? Do we want it to be cool? Do we want it to be clean? Do we want it to be a little grungy? Like those kind of things that kind of, again, it's kind of vibe stuff, but like I think all those help distinguish again how you're going to color grade, even the music you're going to pick, right?
I just always curious because I think my question came to me because a lot of times at the start of a project, it's like, let's play 20 questions about like, what's the runtime? What are the inspo videos? What's the call to action? Like, I don't know. There's just so much. And I feel like I keep chasing this, like, what does it look like if it was easy to like really crystallize what you would want, what you'd need to know to either do a project successfully, or in my, even earlier is like to quote it. What do I need to know to figure out how much this thing is going to cost? And I think for me, it was like inspo videos was like a big one because that starts
Mhm.
to, like you said earlier, like nail down some of the style and the look and like the pacing and what do you like about those specifically? Like, do you
Yeah,
like the graphics in it? Do you like the music, that whatever, right?
yeah,
And
especially
then,
if it come from a client, yeah, like you really need to know what is it you like about
mhm.
this, not just that you like it, right?
Yeah, because we've
Yeah.
gotten somewhere it's like wildly different. We're like, what is the common theme between all these? So it's like it has to be paired with like, what about it do you like? In my
Mhm.
mind,
Yeah.
um, and then like, who is it for? Like, who's the goal audience?
Yep.
And then, um, I think the last one I came up with was like, what action do you want them to take after watching the video?
Yeah. Those are good. I guess I didn't think about those because those are more like those are the things that should be already in a like creative brief or something that we would have on hand. So like we normally set that stuff like because that stuff I would be talking to a client for a kickoff meeting. Like, where are goals of this video? Who are we talking to? Blah, blah, blah. What do we want to do at the end of like, what do we want to take away at the end of it? How do we want to feel when they watch this video? Those kind of things I ask in early on when we're starting something.
I probably should have phrased it as like, what three things from a creative brief would you want an editor to know? Like if your creative brief could only have three fields on it, what would those be?
Well, the goal of the video, I think, like, just what is the goal of this video is like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's up there, like top first thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
audience and call to action, kind of like call to action is kind of it is a term we use in this industry, but like, I kind of like to say, like, what do you want someone to do after they watch this? Because like sometimes there's not a true call to action. Like sometimes if it's just like a feel good story out there you want to put out, right? Like it's just like more brand awareness, right? Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
so it's more like, what do you want someone to do, kind of and feel after this? But because I think those help dictate if a person's aware of what those things do, that'll help them make those other decisions about. Doesn't mean they might get it right what we were thinking, but the vibe stuff, and like if your target audience is 20-year-olds versus 50-year-olds, and whatever, like that really helps own some of that stuff and decisions that when we do it, like we factor in even like style of shooting and all that stuff, like depending on who you're, right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, parting words. If you had some advice to someone who is in this situation where they recognize that they need to either increase their capacity for editing or level up, the abilities. So it could either be a skill thing or a volume sort of thing. What advice would you give on like figuring out which path to go down with all the options available with handling post?
So editing is such a how is this? It's I feel like it's a very different flow than like doing the other stuff, like pitching, writing, meetings. And it's also one of those things where you need to get into that flow. You shouldn't just do it for 30 minutes and then do it 30 minutes some other time. And to really be good at it, efficient at it, you need to be able to be like, I can block off like half the whole morning or half the day or the whole afternoon and work on this. And so I find it is the most like hard to fit into if you're doing a million other things. And so I think it's the easiest thing to buy back your time on if you're in video production world. Like it's the one thing, unless it's what you love to do, and then you should find ways for someone else to do all the other things until you can edit, right? But if you're like, hey, I like doing all this stuff, but I'm losing run out I'm out of time, like I'm running you know 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and like I need to scale that back because I want to have a life. I say that would be the easiest thing to like pass off, that because it's the biggest rocks. They use that example, and I think what Steve Covey came up with that originally, but
It's track.
like
Oh, yeah, I think
um,
you're right.
in Seven Habits of Highly Effective People,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it's like, you got the cup, and if you put like the sand in first, and then you can't fit the small pebbles and the rocks, put it in the bucket. But if you put the big rocks in, then the small ones in, and then the sand, it all fits. And
Mm-hmm.
so that, but anyway, so that's your time and everything. I think Dan Martell uses that also in his book, talking about time. And so those are the big chunks that are in there. And if you plan them, you can maybe make it work, but eventually those start to hit hard to keep fitting in if all you're doing is, you have so much of the other stuff. So I think there's a big opportunity to get some of your time back, is find somebody to delegate some of the editing to, again, whether it's in-house or bringing somebody on if you have that much work, or using a freelancer post house is obviously more smaller scale to bigger scale, right? You can, if you only have like 10 hours a week that you need to hand off, and that's not a full-time another person. So but you could use a outsource that to somewhere. So
Yeah, editing is all consuming, right? I can't listen to a podcast while I edit. Like I have to, it's engaging so many senses and your passion. Like you have to, like, at least for a lot of the narrative storytelling, I feel like you and I both do. It's like you have to get into the story, especially if it's like candid interview based, right? Like you can't just drop into that, like you said, for 30 minutes. So, yeah, once I guess maybe you see the other sides of your business suffering for the lack of time just that it takes to edit, like that seems like a good cue. Well, great. Thank you so much for joining me on this, Josh. How can other people find out more about you, or like check out your work, or connect if they want to ask follow-up questions or anything?
The company's website, connectfilms.com, has some of, but a lot of my past work before that, I have my Vimeo account. It's Josh Youngbar. It's like vimeo.com/Josh Youngbar. And there you can see like all the work I've done for going back several years. But like hand created, like it's not like everything I've done, but like all the good stuff. And you can, I guess you can follow me on Instagram or whatever. It's also J Youngbar.
Well, thank you again for being on. I really
Yeah,
appreciate your perspective on all this stuff,
yeah.
and yeah, just enjoyed
Hopefully,
our chat.
hopefully I said something useful.
No, tons of gold, man. No, that's
Very good.
huge. Thank
Good.
you.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you, David.
Thanks so much for joining Josh and I in our conversation. I think one of the biggest key takeaways for me was his perspective on how delegating the edit isn't a loss of control, it's an opportunity for the project to become even better. I think it was just a really powerful lesson in trusting your team and letting go of the need for perfection. To learn more about Josh and his team's work over at Connect Films, you can check out his contact info in the show notes. Don't forget to hit subscribe. This has been Let's Fix Post.